Just as a note that our webinar is being recorded, and a recorded version of the webinar will be available at the conclusion of our webinar. A web link will be emailed to you, and it will also provide additional resources on a resource page that today's presenters have so kindly provided. Just a note, we would love to hear from you. We will have a Q&A at the conclusion of our webinar. There is a chat function available. It's in your controls. So find your chat box, and then by clicking on the thought bubble will enable you to share any questions that you may have as the presentation is going on. Those questions will be answered during our Q&A time. When that opens, Stephanie Coleman, who's leading our Q&A, will acknowledge your question and ask the appropriate presenter to respond. And just again, as those who have just recently joined us, as a few housekeeping notes, please everyone be sure to mute yourself, as well as turn off any of your video sharing that may be on. Our presenters will be unmuted during their presentation, and they'll be sharing their video at that time. For those of you who are just joining us, welcome. And now I'd like to introduce to you Ralph Schulz, our President and CEO of the Nashville Area Chamber of Commerce.
Well, hello, everyone, and thank you for joining the webinar. You guys are on the front lines of the resilience that Nashville demonstrates every time it meets a challenge, and we know that you have an immense challenge that you're facing. I apologize for the backdrop here in the room above my garage. I trust not everybody has a really glamorous backdrop for their videos. So I hope I'm somewhat in sync. But we do have an economy here in Nashville that will aid the resilient response to the tornado recovery, as well as the coronavirus activity that's taking place right now. And one of the strengths of this community is the leadership that we experience with lots of small businesses, the adaptability of small businesses as they go forward. I just want to say on behalf of all of the sponsors, and they are great partners to be working with, our hope is to connect you to good information that is going to help you to respond to these challenges and help your business to prosper again in the future. So thanks to all of you for being a part of this, and thanks to the presenters and our partners in this webinar for putting this webinar on. And I'll drop off and listen.
Hello, Nashville business and business owners. Mayor John Cooper here. This has been a challenging and unprecedented month for our city. The tornado and now COVID-19 are putting enormous strain on everyone. So many of you stepped up in the days after the tornado to focus on your rebuilding and to take care of your employees and provide resources and relief for those affected. Now, as a city, we are fortunate to have you. As entrepreneurs and longtime business owners, you continuously support our community. And now we are here to support you. We're committed to providing critical resources and timely information to help you during this trying time. I believe that we will overcome these challenges and preserve the strength that Nashville has been known for. You can count on us to maintain strong connections with our business and community partners as we navigate this uncharted territory and rebuild together. I'm grateful to our partners who are here to support and answer your questions about business continuity planning, recovery, insurance negotiation, workforce management, and access to capital. The road ahead won't be easy, but my administration and our whole city is standing with you. Be strong and stay healthy, Nashville.
This is Stephanie Coleman with the Nashville Area Chamber of Commerce, and also want to welcome you all here as well. So really appreciate all of our speakers, but also really appreciate each and every one of those who have tuned in today. We know that many of you are dealing with multiple challenges back to back with the tornado and with COVID-19, and we want you to know that you're not alone. You know, we are a community that supports each other, and even in this strange time where we can't actually be together physically, we want everyone to know that we are here for you. And we want you to understand that there are other businesses out there who either have gone through and have come out of similar situations, or maybe they're going through it right at the same time as you are. So we wanted to start out by sharing a couple of personal stories with you of other business owners who have dealt with challenges and are dealing with challenges. First, we're going to start with CHRISTY PRUITT-HAYNES with Our Truths and CHRISTY PRUITT-HAYNES Consulting. CHRISTY was a survivor of the flood back in 2010, and she's going to share a little bit of her story about what that experience was like and how she has gotten through that. So I'll turn it over to CHRISTY.
Thank you, Stephanie, and thank you all for tuning in. As Stephanie mentioned, I was here in Nashville during the flood. I'm actually a native Nashvilleian, so I've lived here most all of my life. And in 2010, I found myself a new entrepreneur. I left my corporate job just a year before that. I also honestly was recently divorced, and my daughter just started private school. So financially, there was a very strategic plan to everything. And like most entrepreneurs, and probably many of you on this call, I had multiple lines of income or multiple streams of income just to ensure that everything flowed as smoothly as possible. And on Monday, May 10th, 2010, I found myself with many Nashvilleians literally sitting on my kitchen floor in tears. I own 3 rental properties. All 3 of those were damaged in the flood, one of them very significantly. So if you look at pictures of that home, it looked as if the house was sitting in the middle of a lake. And the tenants from that house in particular called and said, you know, CHRISTY, it looks like the water's coming into the backyard. And then 5 minutes later, it was, they have killed the power to the neighborhood and we're being taken out of this house by a boat. So I was faced with some very significant financial challenges on having to repair 3 houses just to not only obviously keep my tenants with a place to live, but also to maintain my financial stability. The first thing was to make sure everyone was physically safe, and fortunately no one was hurt. But very soon thereafter, we switched to how do we restore a sense of normalcy for those 3 families and for my own. I, like most people, learned there was no insurance coverage for this, and I didn't have enough savings to cover major repairs to 3 homes. So I looked for resources everywhere I could and was truly relieved to find all that was available through FEMA and the Small Business Administration. I went to one of the assessment centers, had a conversation with them, and they literally held my hand through the process of getting a low interest loan so I could take what would have been probably a 6-month or more time to have the finances to repair those homes. And I was able to take that down to just a month. The process was simple. It's not like getting a loan for a mortgage or going to a traditional bank. It didn't have the same underwriting, which was really important. I just purchased my personal home at the time. So that was another real concern of mine. If I would have had, you know, the same underwriting guidelines that a traditional loan had, I would not have been able to secure the funding that I desperately needed. So the FEMA and the SBA stepped in. They provided low interest loans. With that, I was able to get the repairs done to all 3 of the homes in literally no time, return those families to their homes and regain the financial stability that I needed for my family. The other true benefit of the entire process was the programs they had in place at that time provided some deferment of payment. So everyone is concerned that it's still a loan, it is still something that has to be repaid, and that's the truth. But fortunately, there were a few months where I could defer those payments while I built up my savings again, made sure everything was moving smoothly, and ensured that I had the money to actually pay those loans back. And because the interest rates were so low and the payments were something that I could easily work into my budget, I was able to pay those off in a much shorter time than I anticipated. And the families in those 3 homes were returned to their normal life as soon as possible. So I am very grateful for those resources that were available. And quite honestly, I'm not sure how I, as an entrepreneur, would have made it without that. So while it's not a situation I would wish on anyone, I know where several people are finding themselves in that now. And I know later in this call, we're going to hear a lot about the resources available.
Thank you, Christy, for sharing your story. Now we're going to hear from Tabitha and Joshua Mundy, who were affected by both the tornado on March the 3rd and the coronavirus. We're going to hear their story and where they are right now in their process.
Hey, well, I'm, like she said, I'm Joshua Mundy. Here with my wife, Tabitha, and we currently on March the 3rd lost 3 businesses during the tornado. So it's been kind of overwhelming going through the whole process of actually losing businesses and then now dealing with this whole coronavirus. So we're kind of like stuck trying to figure it out. But Nashville has been so very much supportive in regards to wrapping their arms around our family. The thing is just, it's somewhat overwhelming because there's so much information being thrown on us all at the same time, from FEMA to the SBA. Now we have to do 2 applications because now we have the coronavirus and now the tornado. So it's been a lot to deal with, but I think with all the resources being laid out, I think we'll have an opportunity to really get back on our feet and get our businesses back open. We also have a 501c3 that was affected called the FORTITUDE group, and my wife is going to talk about that.
The FORTITUDE group is an organization that provides housing solutions for people who have mental health illnesses. That is one of the most forgotten populations, I believe, in our city right now. So we have an opportunity to take people who don't have any place else to live and provide shelter for them. And with that shelter, we also help them rehabilitate, get them to doctor appointments, psychological visits, make sure they're doing their medication, they're taking it, it's managed at a appropriate level. We provide meals for them that are healthy. And they were also affected in the tornado. And right now, having to deal with being self-contained at home because of COVID-19. During the tornado, when we left the property downtown, our dry cleaners and the lab and event space, we went over to FORTITUDE and realized that it had equally been devastated on the whole street of Underwood. There were down wires, trees were uprooted in the yard. There was a big steel pole right in front of the nonprofit that had fallen on the neighbor's house right across the street. The neighbor's house across the street, the upper level had been taken completely off. As a matter of fact, that's where the resident lived, and he was lifted out of the house into the ground. And so our house manager for our nonprofit actually went over to check on them, as well as having to manage the home where the guys with the mental health illnesses live. Like Josh had said, the community really did come together to help during that time as well. Calling to check on us. They actually came over to help get the trees and the leaves up. And NES was really good about getting the power back on. But in the meanwhile, people helped us with generators and help life continue on in the nonprofit for the guys as well.
That's our piece.
Tabitha and Joshua, thank you so much for sharing your story. I know that we are all here and thinking about you all, and want to hear now from some of those resources that come in just these kind of situations to help out when businesses are trying to figure out what their first step is. So turning it over to MYRA SHIRD first with FEMA, who has led the efforts in Tennessee after the tornado.
Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me to present during today's Tornado Business Disaster Recovery webinar. I want to applaud you for the important work that you're doing here to facilitate the recovery for Nashville's business community. After all, businesses large and small are the lifeblood of thriving communities, and they are especially important during these challenging times. Working closely with our partners at TEMA, my team and I have been on the ground since March the 3rd, assessing the needs of those in impacted communities and helping them navigate the path to recovery. Next slide, please. As you heard from some of the earlier testimonials, FEMA has been important in their individual lives, and I'd like to thank each of them for their acknowledgements. As of close of business on March the 25th, FEMA has approved more than $1.3 million in disaster grants for 427 Tennessee homeowners and renters who sustained uninsured or underinsured losses from the storms. The totals include more than $962,000 in housing grants to assist people in rebuilding or repairing their homes, and to provide the means for a safe place to stay while they consider their long-term housing options. More than $345,000 in grants for other needs assistance for things like personal property, transportation, medical, dental, and child care assistance. FEMA inspectors have completed 1,069 home inspections. SBA has approved more than $4.2 million in disaster loans to businesses and households, and our partner from SBA will provide more details in an upcoming presentation. Next slide, please. FEMA public assistance, the federal assistance has been extended to 6 Tennessee counties hit by the March 3rd tornadoes and storms, covering eligible disaster-related expenses and the repair or rebuilding of critical infrastructure. The state of Tennessee, local governments, and certain private nonprofits in Benton, Carroll, Davidson, Putnam, Smith, and Wilson counties can request funding from FEMA's Public Assistance Grant Program to help pay for debris removal, emergency protective measures, and the repair or rebuilding of roads, bridges, water control facilities, buildings, equipment, utilities, parks, and recreational facilities. The federal cost share for reimbursed expenses is not less than 75%. Volunteers and community members should reach out to their local government for guidance on debris removal processes. Next slide, please. You should know that at the height of our operation, we had more than 300 personnel on the ground. This included our disaster survivor assistance teams, which canvassed communities and helped survivors to register. We had disaster recovery centers, which served as focal points for sharing recovery information resources. Like many of you, we've had to move our operations to a virtual environment as we continue to work on Tennessee recovery from the tornadoes and storms. Next slide, please. Survivor assistance still exists, and we are able to support you by going virtual. Encourage those with uninsured losses to call FEMA to apply for federal disaster assistance. Survivors can apply for assistance by visiting www.disasterassistance.gov, downloading the FEMA app for Android or iPhone, and by calling 1-800-621-3362 from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. local time, 7 days a week. Help is available in many languages. The deadline to register is May 4th, 2020. In closing, again, I applaud you for your commitment to helping Nashville's businesses and the business community. I have no doubt that despite a very challenging environment, your hard work will pay great dividends in the future. Thank you for your time and your partnership. Look forward to working with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Myra. We really appreciate FEMA being here in this time of need. Now we're going to turn it over to LaTanya Channel, who's here with us at our local SBA office.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can see me and I hope you can hear me. And please forgive me, I'm fighting with the sun this afternoon, so I hope that's a little better. And thank you once again for joining us this afternoon. Everyone's gone virtual. SBA, we actually went virtual yesterday. We've actually had staff that were still coming into the office. And of course, as everyone knows, this virus has us all going virtual, and we did the same yesterday. So I don't have a pretty backdrop either. And again, I'm fighting with the sun. So I'm going to move back a little bit in hopes that you can see me. What's most important is that you actually just see the slides that we have on the screen. I'm going to give you a really quick overview of what's available when the president declared a disaster here as a result of the tornado, and briefly touch upon also what's available since the increase in the COVID-19 cases, where also a disaster declaration was done and funds were provided for those businesses as well. When I say brief, it's a high-level overview, because afterwards I'm going to let you know how you can get some more information, some more hands-on assistance available to you. So you can head to the next slide. So this is the top line information as it concerns the disaster declaration for the tornado that occurred on March the 3rd. And I do want to mention, Myra mentioned FEMA assistance here in Tennessee. Just so you know, in general, whenever there is a presidential declaration of a disaster, where FEMA goes, SBA goes. So when we open up those centers, there's always SBA staff available there. And then we'll also open up additional centers to cater to businesses. As Myra had already mentioned, we've gone virtual at all those centers. And I'll make sure you have that information at the end of when I finish speaking here today. So what's available from SBA? So a lot of people say loans. Why would I want to get a loan when there is, I'm trying to recover from a disaster? Well, SBA that's what we've been in the business of doing since 1953. And what happens is, in the case of a disaster, these loans become direct loans from the Small Business Administration. Many business owners out there who've ever tried to get an SBA loan, I think many of you recognize that you have to go to an actual bank lender, and they provide the loan to you through the bank. And what they get from SBA is a government guarantee from the Small Business Administration. In the case of a disaster, these are actual direct loans from the Small Business Administration. So the underwriting is done by SBA staff. The application is reviewed by SBA staff. The application is received by SBA staff, and the loan decision is made by SBA staff. And you probably heard in the media shortly after the tornado that there was multiple billions of dollars just approved just to address and to help businesses and also homeowners and renters recover from the tornado. So you'll see on the slide the basics once again as it concerns the physical disaster loans. There's two different types of loans, two different types of loans as it relates to the tornado. The very first one is SBA's physical disaster loan. And the other thing that occurs whenever there is a presidential declaration of a disaster is this is the only time that SBA will loan to large businesses. You know, the S in SBA stands for small. But when it comes to a disaster declaration, this is the only time where large businesses have access to a loan from SBA in the form of a physical disaster loan. Also, for these physical disaster loans, nonprofits, certain nonprofits, including churches, are also eligible for a physical disaster loan. And believe it or not, a homeowner and also renters. Christy mentioned to you before that she was in business where she had multiple rental properties. And I'm glad she told that story tonight, because a lot of folks out there who have rental properties often forget that, hey, you're definitely a business. And it just so happens that SBA can provide that assistance in terms of loans to help you rebuild and recover if your rental properties are damaged. So as far as businesses, whether be they large or small, for the physical disaster loan, those loans can go up to $2 million. The rates are as low as currently 3.75%, and the term is 30 years. For nonprofits, again, we're talking about for physical disaster loans. And when we say nonprofits, we're talking about 501c, 501, 501c, 501d, 501e. If you want more specific, we can talk about that another time because we don't have that much time to get into the details there, but we have the information for you. And again, that's available up to $2 million at an interest rate of 2.75%. If a homeowner suffered physical damage as a result of the tornado, SBA provides loans to homeowners up to $200,000, and the rates for those are 1.563%. And as well as if someone is renting their home, and if they suffered any physical damage to their personal items as a renter, loans are available as well. For the business side and the nonprofit side, I just want to remind everyone that includes the real estate when we talk about physical damage, any inventory, any supplies, any machinery or equipment. And as far as homeowners are concerned, and of course, I've often reminded our business owners who are applying, if their home was also damaged, they are also eligible for an SBA loan for their home. So of course, that includes the actual real estate and physical property that may have been damaged, and any personal property, including automobiles for renters and for homeowners. You can go to the next slide. So once again, I'm still talking about the tornado declaration, or the tornado declaration of a disaster. Two different types of loans that are available. The first one is the physical damage loan that I mentioned. The second type of loan available from SBA, again directly, is what's called an economic injury disaster loan. This is only available to small business and nonprofit organizations. Large businesses are not eligible for this type of SBA disaster loan. The business does not have to be physically damaged for an economic injury disaster loan. The funds are used to meet your ordinary and necessary obligations like accounts payable, payroll, and rent that you can't otherwise pay because of what happened. The purpose is to get you through and to tide you over and to get you through that period. The interest rates and terms are also on the slides that's shown, up to $2 million, the same 3.75%, 30-year term for business. Go to the next slide, please. So this is just quickly, once again, just giving a quick summary of the two different types of loans. On the right, you'll see a mention of COVID-19, a totally different declaration and a totally different type of loan. Let me back up. The economic injury is the same type of loan, but for COVID-19, that is the only type of loan that SBA is offering. And once again, small business and nonprofits are available. Josh was mentioning the fact that he now has to do a second application. I'm sure he's referring to possibly the COVID-19 economic injury disaster loan. And yes, sadly, we are big government and our processes can be overwhelming. So if a business applied for economic injury disaster loan under the tornado, yes, there's a second application for the COVID-19 economic injury disaster. I think my time is almost up, but what I want to say is, as you're hearing on the news every single day, in the stimulus package, changes are coming forward fast and furious. So our phones are ringing off the hook at the office trying to field what's coming up, what's changing for these loans. A lot is changing. The most recent changes was effective 2 days ago. If 2 days ago was Monday, I honestly can't remember what day it is. On Monday, for anyone who gets approved for an SBA economic injury disaster loan as it relates to COVID-19, those loan payments are automatically deferred from 1 year from the execution of the promissory note. As it concerns any other disasters that a firm or business may have received an SBA disaster loan, those loans are automatically deferred through December of this year. That was as of 2 days ago. It's very possible 2 days in the future, those dates may change and give greater benefits to small businesses to help you recover and move forward through both the tornado and the COVID-19. Can we go to the next slide? Because I am going over my time. So those are just the basic top line information on the two types of loans available to SBA. As MYRA has mentioned so far, just for the tornado, over $4 million has already been approved. Yes, the process is overwhelming. Yes, it can be time consuming. Yes, it can be taxing. But I think what we're trying to do is make sure we have available resources to help you navigate through that. One of the things is my staff right now is working 100% just on disaster. So if you cannot get through to that 800 number that's on the screen, or you have challenges applying for the loan online, call my office, 615-736-5881. We literally have about 4 pages of Q&As that we have gotten from the SBA Disaster Office, so we can help our firms here in Tennessee, because right now, the application line, the phone line, and the application system is being swamped by all the businesses nationwide that are now eligible for COVID-19 SBA disaster loans. And then just one final thing right after this, we'll make sure you have information and dates and times on other webinars that will be ongoing. Starting Monday, my office will be doing twice a day, virtual call-in, virtual office hours, 1 in the morning at 10 and 1 in the afternoon at 3, just for anyone and everyone to call in about both the tornado disaster assistance and also the COVID-19. Also, next week, the Entrepreneur Center has mentors available to help you navigate all your options as a business owner, and we're in partnership with them as well. Also, Metro Nashville, the mayor's office, is going to start weekly webinars where we're going to get into the details of SBA assistance, FEMA assistance, what the state is providing as far as unemployment. So what that means is the vast majority of people who you'll hear from tonight will have a greater opportunity, more than 5 or 10 minutes to speak, probably an hour or more, as we do go through those twice a day virtual call-ins to my office and the weekly webinars with the mayor's office. So again, thanks to the Chamber and the Entrepreneur Center and the mayor's office, and looking forward to the partnership, because what's important is that where I represent, big government makes sure that we meet the needs of the businesses here in Tennessee. And I cannot get that done without the help of the Chamber and entrepreneurship in the mayor's office. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much, LaTanya. Really appreciate you. Our next speaker is Josh Barnes, also with SBA, and he is an expert in disaster recovery. I did get a note that he had dropped off and was coming back on the call. So I'm going to give just a second to see if he is back on, and if not, we'll come back to him in a second and move on to Keith Heyman. And it looks like we're still waiting on Josh, so let's go ahead and move on to Keith.
Hey, everybody.
Hi, Keith.
Okay, you can hear me. That's good news. All right, hey, everyone. I'm Keith Heyman. I've lived in Nashville 10 years. I live in Germantown, and it's very unfortunate that the tornado hit our neighborhood and lots of the East Nashville and lots of the area. I've been working on insurance claims here in Nashville since the tornado, working with small business, seeing the insurance company and contractors and support come out in large numbers to get these claims moving. What I've done is I put together a deck that's about 12 screens long that you can get from the resource center that's easy to download and easy to navigate through. What I'm gonna do is just give you kind of the highlights, because I know we've got a lot of information. I could spend an hour on this, but I'm gonna spend 3 minutes. Okay, so first of all, I go over a disaster timeline that's presented. If we can go to the next slide. Okay, I'm just going to show you what's incorporated in each slide. One slide we have is a disaster timeline for the insurance claims process. This goes step by step. It pretty much shows you the insurance claims process. Next slide, please. In the next slide, we've got, oh, okay, don't worry about the next slide. The next, I deal with the building claim, and we go into different issues of the building claim. Generally, you've got potential roof issues, water intrusion. You can have potential structural issues with your building. It's very important that if you have a structural issue with your building, that you have a structural engineer come out and do an evaluation. Also included in my presentation are challenges. For instance, one of the challenges that we deal with after post-disaster is fluctuations of cost of construction and some price gouging. Okay, so it's important that you look at the cost of material costs and labor costs, because they can fluctuate during the claims process. When you have that going on, be sure to notify and talk about it with your insurance company so the proper adjustments are made in the process. In addition, cash flow is an issue during the insurance claims process. It's important that you document your claim and present it to the insurance company and request for partial payments. The documents that support that is a very key component. I touch into business interruption. It's important that you have good books and records and that you understand the coverages that you have. So when you review your business interruption coverage in your policy, it's good to understand if you have ordinary payroll coverage, how many days are included. That's a very important key component. The extended period of indemnity is language in your insurance policy that you should review. If you have coverage for an extended period, for instance, if you're a local restaurant, once you reopen your business operations, that coverage helps you recover your potential ramp up during that time of business. Other important coverage to look at that you may have in your policy is utility service interruption coverage. If power goes down, you may have coverage for that. That covers, even if you weren't physically affected, it may cover some of your lost business. Civil authority, which a lot of us are dealing with COVID, that can provide coverage when the government authority has you shut down or if you can't access the area. Dependent properties coverage that you should look for in your policy, that if you're not physically affected and you're interdependent on another property, you may have policy coverage for business interruption. Ingress, egress. If, for instance, you own a restaurant and it's open for business, but the streets are shut down, you may be able to have coverage due to physical damage in your area for business interruption. I touch in another slide, I touch on the contents claim. It's very important to be thorough for everything that you may have lost in your business. Not only have you lost potential computers and equipment, but also the cables and everything behind it. It's important that you value these things at replacement cost and apply any applicable taxes and installation as well in your claim. Debris removal is another slide in my presentation. Generally, you sometimes can have additional coverage afforded in your policy above your policy limits. It's important that you review your coverage to make sure if you have debris removal coverage and if it's an additional line item to your total policy limit. I have another slide that addresses documentation. Most importantly in insurance claims is having very good, clear documentation, having it detailed. That's what the insurance company needs to help pay the claim. If your documentation is not clear, it's possible the insurance adjuster will send it back to you and request more detailed information. And the issue with that is that it delays you getting paid when you need monies right now. I go into additional tips and post-disaster challenges. Generally in these situations, especially with COVID now, the insurance adjusters are overburdened with files. So the easier you make their job, the easier it makes them to be able to pay your claim. I'm going to conclude because we're on an intense time frame. But if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer now or later. And I'm just going to post my email address if you have specific questions. And that's all I got. Thank you for your time.
Thanks so much, Keith. This was great information. And for all of those listening, we do have the full slide deck that we will provide as a follow-up to all of those listening in. So really, really important to understand that the insurance claims process, it's a big part of how to help businesses get back on their feet. So thank you, Keith. With that, we are going to go ahead and switch to Laura Baker, who's president of the Nashville Bar Association, and is going to share some legal resources and information for you all.
Thank you. Since the tornado hit, the Nashville Bar Association began our work, the role that we play in responding to legal disasters. We consider ourselves and the lawyer members of our association to be third responders in a disaster like this. So we are not the emergency responders who are saving lives. And while we may help with the cleanup efforts with other community groups and churches and government agencies, the real work that we do comes in after everyone has started rebuilding their lives, and we help with the complicated legal issues that can arise. And we've heard a lot of those already from some of our other speakers. For example, applying for FEMA aid, there are deadlines to meet to apply for it, and then you can also be denied aid, and there's an appeals process. So volunteer lawyers through the Nashville Bar Association and other bar associations and legal services organizations can be very useful in helping businesses and individuals who are denied go through the appeals process. We immediately called a meeting of our local bar associations and our legal services organizations following the tornado disaster. And once President Trump declared a FEMA disaster, the American Bar Association Disaster Legal Services was deployed also here to Nashville. We've been having weekly meetings where we have been coordinating with one another and coordinating with FEMA and Red Cross to make sure that we're responding to the legal needs of our community. To that end, the Nashville Bar Association has actually conducted a training for volunteer lawyers to discuss the FEMA application process and the other legal issues that can arise after a disaster like this, including landlord-tenant issues, housing issues, issues with contractors, issues with applying for FEMA aid, and other financial situations that people who are victims are facing. We also have participated in several legal clinics. The most recent one we held in North Nashville, where there has been a great need for assistance across the board and also legal assistance. Because of the COVID-19 pandemic, we actually tested at this clinic last Thursday a teleclinic model. We had some lawyers, including myself, who came in person, practiced appropriate social distancing measures, and gave assistance to people on the ground. We also had a number of attorneys who participated by telephone, and our teleclinic model worked. And so we're going to repeat that this Saturday. We're doing a teleclinic in partnership with the Legal Aid Society. It'll be from 8:30 to 11 a.m. and the telephone number for that clinic is 615-780-7131. We are also coordinating with the Tennessee Alliance for Legal Services, or TALS, and they are running the 1-844-HELP-4TN telephone hotline. TALS does not, yes, the number is, for the TALS hotline is 1-844-HELP-4TN. The number for the legal clinic on Saturday is 615-780-7131. The 844 hotline is through TALS, and they actually don't have any kind of income limit, so anybody can call and get free legal answers from lawyers. And we actually have volunteer attorneys who are not only answering those calls, but then we have over 160 lawyers here in Middle Tennessee who have volunteered to take appointments from the calls to the hotline. I saw a question about the clinic this weekend. We do not have a physical presence for the clinic this weekend. It's going to be entirely a teleclinic model. So again, that number is 615-780-7131, and the hours are from 8:30 to 11 a.m. And then I think everyone heard that the deadline for FEMA aid is May 4th. If FEMA aid is denied, the appeals deadline is 60 days from the denial. And so we're expecting that as we get past that May 4th deadline, we will start to see some legal need for assistance in appealing any decisions. And I understand from Darkenya Waller, who's the executive director of the Legal Aid Society, that they are already starting to see their first denial cases. So the Nashville legal community is stepping up to help with the legal needs of our small business owners and our tornado survivors to help respond to those legal needs. I know there's going to be a separate webinar tomorrow on COVID-19, but I will also mention that our Bar Association is working with TALS to also put together some free legal clinics for small business owners, entrepreneurs, and partners who are in financial distress in responding to the COVID-19 pandemic to help businesses and entrepreneurs avoid bankruptcy in this situation. And we will be providing more information that will be shared through that webinar tomorrow. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Laura, and thanks again for sharing that great information and the contact. And just so everyone knows, we are going to have a resource page available after this webinar concludes that has the phone numbers and the links to get you where you need to go to find more information about those clinics and resources. With that, we're going to turn it over to Vivian Wilhoit, who is our Assessor of Property here in Metro Nashville-Davidson County.
Hello, everyone. I appreciate this partnership with the National Chamber of Commerce and my office and the other partners on this phone call. We thank you for the opportunity to provide commercial property owners with critical information as a result of the recent tornado. Let me also say that our prayers are especially with those who were impacted by the storms. Next slide, please. My responsibility as the Assessor of Property of Davidson County, along with my incredible staff, is to identify, list, appraise, and classify all taxable properties to achieve equity and value and prepare the annual assessment rolls in a timely manner. Now, that would be the 26,218 commercial industrial parcels, the 27,838 personalty accounts, and the 219,132 residential and farm parcels. Next slide, please. For tornado victims who suffer substantial damage to buildings and improvements, including residential, commercial, and industrial buildings, state law, Tennessee Code Annotated 67-5-603, or in other words, TCA 67-5-603, provides that the assessor will assess the value of such property based upon its condition after the tornado, provided the property is not restored or replaced by September 1. So in this case, be 2020. The substantial damage for buildings and improvements could be those that are not inhabitable, are not fit for use or occupancy, or those damages that have reduced the value of the improvements by at least 50%. Post-damage valuation will be made on a pro-rated basis, with the structure's normal pre-tornado value applying from January 1 through March 3rd. This is also the case for commercial and industrial tangible property destroyed or substantially damaged by the tornado that is restored or replaced by September 1. TCA 675-606 authorizes the assessor and, again, my awesome staff to prorate the assessment of the personal property for the portion of the year as of the date of the destruction or the substantial damage. So in this case, that will be March 3rd, 2020. Next slide, please. As a result of the coronavirus pandemic, updates provided by our public health officials, Mayor John Cooper, Governor Bill Lee, and Comptroller Justin Wilson, we are presently closed for Monday, from Monday, March 23rd through Friday, April the 3rd. But please know that our closure date, it may be extended, but we're open for your questions and your concerns about your property and your property values. So please contact us in the following ways. You can call us directly by phone at 615-862-6080, where you can leave a message. You can also email us at assessorweb@nashville.gov. Of course, the traditional way of the U.S. Postal Service, mail us your concerns at Office of Assessments, P.O. Box 196-305, Nashville, Tennessee 37219. Or please visit us at our website of www.padctn.gov, where you can not only send us an email from our website, but you'll find a wealth of information there. That concludes the information that we can provide here as assessments and valuation of property. But if you contact us in any of those methods, we're going to respond to you expeditiously, even though we are really close to the walk-in public and what have you. So thank you again for this partnership with the Nashville Chamber of Commerce and for this opportunity to present to its members and to the business community as a whole. As always, it is our pleasure to serve. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vivian. Really appreciate you being with us.
My pleasure.
We're going to turn it over to Bill Herbert, who is Director of Metro Codes. Another frequent question we get from the business community is what's going to happen with the approval process with Metro Codes. So appreciate Bill being here with us. And I'm going to interrupt Bill for just a second. Bill, you are on mute. There you go.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me adjust this just. Okie dokie. All right. So I'm Bill Herbert. I'm the Director of Metro Codes. And in response to the tornado on Tuesday, March 3rd, we mobilized all of our inspectors at the Codes Department. We mobilized 30 teams of 2 persons, and we inspected over 1,600 residences. We also inspected over 460 businesses. We assessed each of those structures for damage in accordance with the processes that were laid out by FEMA. In response to that, and in response to COVID-19, we have had to modify our processes within the Codes Department as a result of the storm and the tornado. What we've done is we have expedited the permitting process for all storm-related permits. We have also expedited the plan review for construction of a new construction for commercial businesses. We've also expedited the inspection. So when a contractor does work and calls in for an inspection, we will expedite those inspections as well. It's my understanding that other Metro departments have likewise expedited all their processes for tornado-related damage. Just FYI, there is a council bill that has been filed, and if it's adopted, it would waive the building permit fees associated with tornado damaged structures. Here is some of the things, the type of work that would require a permit from our department. Things that are structural in nature. Running new wires or new lines would require a permit. For instance, a repair of an existing plumbing line does not require a permit. That's a simple repair, but running a new line does. As a rule, generally all electrical work will require a permit. The types of work that does not require a permit is such things as replacing shingles on a roof, or replacing glass in windows, replacing drywall, or painting, or any other that type of cosmetic related work. The reason that a permit is required in the first place is so that our inspectors can inspect the work that was done by a contractor to make sure that work is code compliant, and more importantly, to make sure that the work is safe for the person who's going to be inhabiting the building. Contractors that are licensed with Metro generally know what type of work requires a permit and what does not. Metro licensed contractors now, because of COVID-19 and the tornado, can offer their permits electronically. We are having remote meetings with zoning examiners for the contractors. And so everything can be handled from their office without need to come down to our department. And again, those permit reviews will be expedited so we can get the permits issued as quickly as possible. On another note, all of the trade contractors, that is the electricians, the plumbers, and the gas mechanical inspectors or contractors, may issue their own permits from their own office. They may pay for them from their office without need to come down to our department. When a contractor completes work on a structure, it is the duty of that contractor to call for the inspection. That the contractor may call for the inspection on the telephone or may call for the inspection via email. And generally, we're doing our best to have next day inspections, but right now it has been a challenge, especially with the electrical reconnects as a result of the storm damage. If for any reason a contractor tells you that you need, as a property owner or business owner, that you need to call for the inspection, that is a signal that something may be wrong. Something like the contractor is not properly licensed, or that that contractor did not pull a permit for work that would otherwise require a permit. So I'm going to take a second here and just talk about the advice that I would give in terms of hiring a contractor to do the work. First things first, what I would do is verify that the contractor is licensed to do work in Metro. That's easy to verify by going to our Metro's to the code's website at nashville.gov and go to the e-permit system, and you can check, and in there is a database that has all Metro licensed contractors. State contractors, that is contractors who are licensed through the state, we Metro will honor their licenses. All they need to do is register their license with Metro, and they'll be able to do the work within Davidson County. If you have any questions about a state contractor, whether they have a state license, I would encourage you to go to this website. It is verify.tn.gov. That's verify.tn.gov. And on there, you can check to see if a contractor is licensed with the state of Tennessee. If I were someone who was in the process of hiring a contractor, the first thing that I would do is ask them for proof of their Metro license. I would also ask to see proof of insurance and that they're appropriately bonded. And I'd like to have a copy of the permits that they pulled so that you would know that they in fact did pull the permits if permits were required for the work. I think it would also be advisable to get a number of bids from individual contractors. I would get also the scope of the work that they're going to be performing for you in writing. I would never pay in full up front, and I would keep very good records regarding the damage and the repair that was done, including photographs throughout the entire process. So that includes my portion of this, and I'd like to thank the Chamber for giving me the opportunity. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Bill. That was a lot of great information. Really important to make sure that the contractors that people are using are verified and certified to work here. We're going to pass it over to KENYATTA Lovett, Assistant Commissioner at the Tennessee Department of Labor and Workforce Development, and then Marla Rye will follow, President of Workforce Essentials, to talk a little bit about what employers are doing to ensure that their employees have the resources that they need in this challenging time, and also for those who've had to make some tough decisions about their workforce, what are some alternative options that they should consider? So turning it over to KENYATTA.
Thank you, Stephanie, and I hope you can hear me. We're going to start this presentation. Marla is going to kick us off, and then I will add to what Marla has contributed with some final few slides. And Marla, are you ready?
Awesome. Thank you very much. Like most of you, our world was rocked in the month of March. If we go back 30 days ago in the state of Tennessee and Nashville, we were looking at historically low unemployment numbers, and employers were having a difficult time finding workers. Now our world is almost totally the opposite, and I'm here to talk to you a little bit today about the public workforce system and how the American Job Center and the Tennessee Department of Labor can help you. Next slide, please. So again, a little over a month ago, historically low unemployment. I'm sure that a lot of you saw the news this morning where the U.S. Department of Labor and Workforce Development announced that 3.2 million people had lost their jobs and filed for unemployment insurance last week alone. So we have now shifted into a mode of helping individuals transition to other job careers and also helping them file for unemployment insurance to get the assistance that they need immediately. For the tornadoes that happened earlier in the month, the workforce system responded by going out to the impacted areas and setting up in the community centers and in Wilson County with our mobile career coaches. Those coaches are available, as you see in the picture. They are equipped with computer labs, and we were able to have individuals file unemployment insurance claims there on the mobile coach. Next slide, please. So most of our services are operated and delivered through the American Job Center system. In Nashville, the AJC for short is located at 665 Mainstream Drive. So I encourage you, if you haven't been there, when we open back up to the public, right now we're available through telephone services, and their number is 615-253-8920. I encourage you to call that. Part of workforce development is making sure that employers and job seekers or employees have the tools that they need to go to work and stay at work. And we operate programs through the Workforce Innovations and Opportunity Act. And there's a couple of things that I think you might be interested in that will be a benefit for employers. One is the Incumbent Worker Training Grant, where if you're an employer and you have 5 full-time employees, then you're eligible for up to $25,000 of training services to upgrade the skill sets of your workforce. So for those of you that may be impacted and have been able to retain your employees, but maybe they don't have enough work to do at this point in time, maybe as an employer, you can invest in them to upgrade the skill sets that will make you more competitive when you're back in business. Again, if you're interested in an Incumbent Worker Training Grant, you can call the American Job Center. Also, for employers, if, for instance, when you get back up and are running and you need to hire additional workers, maybe your existing employees you've had to lay off and they have gone on to other jobs. We have what we call an on-the-job training contract, where we can pay up to 50% of an employee's wage while they are on the job training during their new hire phase. So again, that's a direct result that will impact the employer's bottom line, offset training and development costs for your employees. Another thing that employers may be facing today is that you've had to lay off some of your staff. And there are many opportunities available in the American Job Center system for those employees. They are considered what we call a dislocated worker because they've lost their job through no fault of their own. So as a dislocated worker, they qualify for free job skill training. So maybe they are at an entry level, and during this time they can use the dislocated worker training grant to go back to school and upgrade their skill sets while they're laid off. During this time, we can also provide support services to them, such as childcare, travel reimbursement, or if they're going to a new field, we can provide such things as equipment, or if they're need steel-toed shoes or anything like that, if they're changing careers, we can provide those support services for them free of charge if they qualify and have lost their job through no fault of their own. We also, and I encourage you to, if you are looking for either employees or if you have jobs to post, I encourage you to look at jobsfortn.gov. That is the state's data management system for workforce development. and there is a ton of talent out there. And Dr. Kenyatta Lovett, the Assistant Commissioner for the Tennessee Department of Labor and Workforce Development, is going to talk a little bit about some of those new initiatives and how to handle the unemployment insurance claims. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Lovett.
Thank you, Marla. And next slide, please. And as Marla mentioned, in this situation where the Middle Tennessee region has experienced damage from the tornadoes that have impacted employers and workers, compounded by the fact that COVID-19 has brought much uncertainty to a lot of our employers. There are some programs at the state level that are actually run through Marla and her workforce board to help employers and help workers get to safety. First, for employers, it's important to mention, especially now where employers are having to make interesting decisions about how to handle their workforce, given that revenue might be decreasing, and in some other cases, revenue has increased. But in the case where there may be a situation where you need to reduce your workforce, just good to know that we have a rapid response unit, both at the state and at the local level, that can help you and think through how best to reduce your workforce if in case that's the situation you're in. Also, it's important to notice or to know that it's expected that you file a WARN notice when you have multiple employees that you will be letting go. That WARN notice is extremely helpful for triggering the rapid response team, but it also activates other things that will be helpful to the employer in giving assistance and services. And last but not least, there are employers who need to file these get ready to lay off workers or let workers go. You can actually do this through a mass claims process. So instead of letting your workers go and they having to fill their unemployment insurance claims themselves, you can actually provide that in a listing to the State Department through jobsfortn.gov, and that mass claims process will already get those dislocated workers in the queue to be able to assist them in the unfortunate case that they're let go and become dislocated workers. On the other end, for the dislocated workers that you know that have been let go or are needing assistance, again, rapid response is helpful with that, and Marla and her team at the Northern Middle Tennessee Workforce Board can help with that. But also, it's important to know that insurance claims, and Marla mentioned that the $3.28 million was the number for this week, just so you know what hit Tennessee. Last week, we had 2,700 claims, so the increase actually started. Normally, it's a lot lower than that, probably half of that. This week, we've had 40,000 claims, so it's an increase of about 36,000 claims this week, and there's still people who can't get through on the phones or having challenges to file. So we're seeing an increased volume, and as a result of some of the requirements from the issue with COVID-19, our American Job Centers are now limiting access within the American Job Center only to the workers who are fielding phone calls and helping with virtual assistance to make sure that those who need to file unemployment insurance claims, whether it is the worker, dislocated worker, or the employer, that we can assist them in that way. So again, as Marla mentioned, jobsfortn.gov is the best place to go to get those services and get that handled. And they also have helpful numbers to reach individuals to get you where you need to get to. Next slide. The last thing I want to mention, and I said that there are some employers in this interesting economic times that have experienced a significant increase in volume and demand where there's a need for workers. If you think about the grocery stores, those in logistics, and the food retail industry, or outfits like Dollar General, they are going through a considerable hiring wave right now. And if you think about on the hospitality end, which Nashville is an extremely big hub for that, there have been so many individuals that are now dislocated because hotels are not getting close to occupancy. We're not going to the restaurants like we used to. And so a lot of people are out of work in the hospitality industry. We announced today at 3 o'clock, the governor and the Commissioner of Labor and Workforce Development, a new program called Tennessee Talent Exchange, which is powered by Jobs for TN. Our first project is to work with the hospitality industry and help to transition those dislocated workers from that industry to see if we can get them placed in areas of retail, food retail and in grocers who right now have a considerable hiring wave going on. You can go on to Jobs for TN or go on to our department site to find out more information. But if you know of anyone that's in the hospitality industry that is a dislocated worker, please encourage them to visit the site. And if you know of any employers on either the hospitality side or the retail or the grocer side that are having some workforce demand changes, please encourage them to do so as well. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that even locally with the Nashville Tech Council, they're actually facilitating their own program for getting people into high demand tech careers right now that's still booming. So while there have been a lot of job losses, we want to make sure that we minimize that by getting people to safety, by having the jobs and the wages that'll keep them moving forward. Next slide. And here are just some numbers and contact information for how you can find out more information about the things that Marla and I talked through. You'll see there's Marla's email address and phone number, along with information about unemployment insurance claims, warrant notices, rapid response, and then finally, more information about how to connect with the Tennessee Talent Exchange. And that will conclude our presentation. And I want to thank Stephanie, thank Ralph, and thank the entire Nashville Chamber leadership team for allowing Marla and I to be part of this web conference.
Thanks so much, Kenyatta and Marla. Really appreciate you all. We're going to circle back just very quickly to Josh Barnes, who had dropped off earlier. He's going to talk about the recovery process as a whole. And once we're done with that portion, that will conclude the presenter remarks, and we'll go into Q&A. And I will be facilitating Q&A. I've got a few questions already lined up, but if you have questions, please type them into the chat feature and we will get to them before we end today. Thank you. And we'll turn it over to Josh.
Well, thank you, everyone. I really appreciate the opportunity, and thanks very much for the patience with some of the communications challenges that I had about a half an hour ago. My name is Josh Barnes. I serve as the Senior Planner in the Office of Continuous Operations and Risk Management at SBA. I have a very short deck, but really what I wanted to do was to share with you some of the some of the lessons learned and the experiences that we've had in how disaster recovery works overall. So, you know, one of the most challenging things about it is that it's fundamentally a marathon, and the problem is that it often feels like it's a, you know, instead of a sprint, it feels like a marathon of sprints, but it's still a marathon. It's something that is both daunting and intimidating, and is difficult to manage, and fundamentally devastating at a very personal level. And so all the resources that have been presented today are terrific arrows in your quiver to look at ways in which you can help restore your business and to try to begin building back to where you want to be. But hopefully I've got a few tips here that I think might hopefully help break the issue down, the magnitude of the recovery down, so hopefully it'll be helpful to you. So if you could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So in terms of breaking down the recovery, you know, one of the things that's really challenging, especially when whether you're sitting at the federal level or the state level or even the local level, and you have a business owner who is speaking to you about the impacts to their business, and they say, and they're impassioned and they're in pain, and they say, I'm losing clients, I've lost so much money, I'm losing my staff, I don't know where to go, I don't know what to do, I need help, and that's a really compelling and very emotionally drawing question and conversation. But one of the problems with it, though, fundamentally, is that for those on the receiving end of that, they often struggle in identifying precisely what is it that I can help with. What is it that are in my programs, my authorities, and my resources that can deal with the issues that business, that you as a business owner are currently dealing with. And so finding ways to help. So this is where the first one is, and doing an assessment to really narrow down into what are the core overarching issues that relate to how you need to implement your recovery. And so it takes kind of taking a step back and then looking at it from is it a capital access issue? Is it that I just can't find a contractor issue? Is it an insurance issue? Is it all of the above? And if so, what is the priority order that I need to be thinking about that? And so in doing that, you are then developing some strategies and some actions, and suddenly you're not being compelled to swallow the ocean. You're now able to take sips out of it, or at least take a glass to it at the very least, and begin breaking it down into hopefully more manageable components. And then ultimately, with the final step there is to implement those steps. There's lots of recovery activities that can be profoundly helpful. And this webinar is a great example of one. Is taking advantage of technical assistance and learning about the resources that are available to you. The other is in reaching out to those organizations, whether they be the SBDCs or other SB resource partners, the universities, those who have information that can help shed light about what does your market look like. Because after a major disaster, the market can fundamentally change, and it's important to know how that's affecting your business. And then lastly, finding ways to work with whether it's public, private, nonprofit organizations to leverage their existing resources. Because what's interesting is that there's a lot of funders out there, there's a lot of resources out there, but not many of them are labeled disaster recovery, or this is for disasters. It's for other things, and so it requires some measure of interpretation of seeing, well, this low rate loan program that's designed to spur entrepreneurship, or this grant program that's meant to help support doing infrastructure rebuilds or something like that, that's maybe made for mainline economic development or other initiatives, but those needs are just as present after a major disaster, and could be very much part of the equation in helping to support your recovery. If you could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So really quickly, there's kind of an inevitability about disaster recovery, and that's that those who are impacted, communities are going to go through the recovery regardless of the intervention or lack of intervention from public or private organizations. And so it really becomes incumbent upon those at the local level, and I think Nashville's a great example of those that are doing a great job of pulling things together to find ways to start to build the base of the coalitions to focus. What are the priorities? What are the needs? What's going on? The trick is that those organizations and the city and the county and the state won't know what those things are if you all as business owners don't communicate it to them. So there needs to become this kind of two-way flow of information where issues and concerns and needs flow up, and then they can then have an opportunity to then share resource information down, and then help to facilitate events like this and others where there can be broader resource opportunities that are brought to bear. If we could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So I'm going to end on this point here, where this is something which is a really important topic, at least for me personally. I have personally led disaster recovery efforts in roughly 38 I think it's now 40 major disasters across the country. And, there's a saying that when you see one disaster, you've seen one disaster. But that said, there are some trends that we see. And one of the most pervasive trends are the impacts of behavioral health impacts. And so what we see is that the disaster happens and there's the impact, and then we have this surge and momentum and not so much enthusiasm and excitement, but it is more almost adrenaline, where we are banding together. We're going to make it happen, and then we're all working together. Things are great, and then most everyone at least, tends to have a moment of their own where the reality of what has been lost hits them hard, and it changes. It varies for everyone. I'll share a quick story of I was working in Joplin, Missouri after the tornado that they had there, and there was a woman who was standing over what in the emergency management we would call a debris pile. It was her home, to be blunt about it, and she was trying to pick through what was left that she could save. And a Salvation Army truck came by, and they were handing out lunches and things like that, and they gave her a hot dog. And they asked her, "Ma'am, is there anything else we can get you?" And then she reached out her arm into nothingness, and then she started crying. She started crying because she reached to where her refrigerator used to be. And she said, "Do you have any ketchup?" Now, for a lot of us, ketchup isn't going to be that, kind of climax moment where the weight of what's happened hits us. But for her, it was realizing that, that having that loss, having that impact, it really just hits home. So then we start to be, realize that we're in this for the long haul, that this is a marathon, that there are going to be frustrations, there are going to be challenges, and there are going to be times where it feels like there's not a real clear path forward. And so that's where having the strategies that I mentioned before can become really helpful to plot through these things. And so they're going through the time of after the incident, after the disaster. There are periods where there will be trigger events. It could be Christmas. It could be another holiday of someone's birthday where everyone got together at someone's house or a restaurant that is become like was a landmark of for that family or for that community, and they can't anymore. And then now it hits them even deeper. But then one of the things that's really important is that there are the opportunities that you can work through that grief. And so you can deal with the protracted impacts of these things. You can deal with the trauma of the uncertainty. And what that means is that there's often a lot of questions about how much is the insurance company going to pay for their settlement for my claim? Are they going to give me what I think that I need in order to repair my home, my business, etc.? Of course, major disasters are going to have an exacerbation of any pre-existing stressors or behavioral health clinical conditions. So that's something to be mindful of. But then there's also the dislocation factor, where if you lost your home, you're not living at home anymore. And so you're living with someone else. And so you're in an unfamiliar, a less familiar environment. You're not where you are used to be. And that in and of itself carries with it its own consequences. And so if we can go to the last slide, please, which is the next slide. Thank you. So I put this up here. I'm not going to read all of this to you, but the bottom line is that you are all leaders in Nashville. You are all leaders, not just in your business, in your families, and there's only one of you. And there's only one. And so you need to take care of yourselves. You need to recognize that there are times when you know, when you when you wake up at 5, 6, 7 a.m. and you work all day long, maybe an 8-hour day, maybe a 12-hour day, and then you spend the next 4 or 5 hours helping with family or doing, picking up, cleaning up, doing what have you, and then you crash exhausted at 11 p.m. and you start that cycle all over again the next day, and a person can only sustain that but for so long. And again, there's only one of you. So be mindful of the signs when that strain is starting to have its impact. About whether or not you can stay asleep. Are you having, one that I, like to pick on is changes in level of pain. Well, what does that mean? Really common example is people get headaches and they say, I just have a headache. I'm going to pop some Excedrin or Tylenol or, Advil or what have you, and it'll be fine. But that's a physical manifestation of stress and strain oftentimes. Of course, I'm not prescribing that. You should see your physician, all of that. But the point is that you should be mindful of the physical consequences. Socially, if you are totally consumed in all things dealing with your recovery, that's a noble and important thing, and you recognize you have to do that. We get that. Everyone gets that. But humans are social creatures, and finding ways to connect with other people is going to help buoy you so that you can go another day. And then also looking at the emotional and spiritual elements of this as well is making sure that just doing a self-check of making sure that you're taking care of yourself, and when you need to, and deliberately taking that time out and just taking a step back. The most common, and I'll end with this, is that the most common sign and the most common need that we've seen of those leaders in communities is what makes them able to recover is not how much money they have, although that certainly helps. It's how organized they can be. You can't be organized if you're completely and totally exhausted and burnt out. And it's going to reach a point where you can't do it anymore. And then those that count on you can't. And nobody wants that. So last thing that I'm going to say is please take care of yourselves. Know that there are ways to break up this process in ways that it can be tangible and digestible, and that there are resources that have been presented here this evening that are available to you to try to be supportive. And with that, I will stop and turn it back and just say thank you.
Josh, thank you so much for reminding us of the humanity of what so many are dealing with, and love the message that there's only one you, and that we have to be mindful to take care of ourselves and take a breath and pause. So thank you for that. That was a really important message. I know we are at the end of our time. We had 2 questions that I want to make sure get answered before we close. And then I'm going to type in an email address, and this goes to Janine Davis on the chamber team. And if you have follow-up questions that we didn't have time to get to during the webinar, please email smallbusiness@nashvillechamber.com. And we will make sure to get those answered for you by the appropriate person. So with that, I'm going to go back to a question that James asked earlier, and this would really be geared toward the SBA to answer, I believe. So James said, would love to know what you qualify for if you have 500 to 1,000 employees company-wide. So his company has 2 branches, a daycare, and 5 restaurants. So if LaTanya or Julie could answer that.
Hello, it's LaTanya. So the very first question is, you need to know what your industry code is. Whenever we determine what's considered small in SBA, we rely on what's called the NAICS code, North American Industry Classification Code. And then SBA takes that and creates small business size standards. So for any of the loans where only eligible small businesses, where only businesses that are small are eligible, you have to meet that particular size standard for that particular industry code. So we can definitely help you figure out what that code is if you don't know, and then help you figure out whether you're considered small. There are some, and it's based on industry. There are some industries where 1,000 employees is still considered small, and there are some industries it doesn't matter how many employees you have. It's based on revenues computed over 3 years. So I'll put in the comments my email address, and you can reach out to me directly, and either I or one of my staff will help you figure out if you're small, and also help you answer the question on which loan type you should seek. And also you mentioned something about multiple subsidiaries, so we can help you directly with that.
Fantastic. And then the last question that we have from the group today was from Audra. Is there a minimum employee number for a mass unemployment filing? And I believe that would go to probably KENYATTA or Marla.
This is KENYATTA, and that's a good question. Typically, those types of mass uploads are 10 or more is preferable, but even if you have one employee, you can do that. The key is to make sure you coordinate that with the employee to know that you're going to be sending that up to the Department of Labor, and that'll help them, and knowing that their processing will probably be a lot more expedited than normal. So it's really just more coordinated with them, but there's no minimal number, but typically 10 or more is what we sometimes recommend.
Thanks so much, KENYATTA. And I think that's all the questions that were included in the chat. So if anyone thinks of something afterward that you didn't get answered today, please email smallbusiness@nashvillechamber.com. And again, we will get that to the appropriate speaker. Just want to take a moment to thank all of our speakers for being with us. Really appreciate the time to help out the business community as we're dealing with a lot going on, but in particular, those businesses who were impacted by the tornado, knowing that they're faced with two challenges back to back. Want to also thank our co-hosts. We're very pleased to partner with the Nashville Entrepreneur Center, with the Mayor's Office, with SBA, with Pathway Lending. Just very grateful for the partnership that we have with each of you. And with that, one other thing we'll mention with this last slide is that we did have many other entities who were participating and listening in and here to answer questions. We've got some of those listed here on the screen. And again, we'll be following up with a resource page that has additional links and resources from many of these organizations. There's a lot more out there, and we have a lot of folks who want to help out in a time of need. So we'll get that information to you. Thanks again for being here. And with that, we'll say goodnight. And I'll mention one other thing, which is we do have another webinar tomorrow. If you haven't gotten enough today, this one will be specifically focused on the COVID-19 situation. And we'll have some other speakers as well joining us to go into a deeper dive on that. So please feel free to join us. The webinar is going to start at noon tomorrow, and you can find information on the Chamber's website, nashvillechamber.com. Thanks, everybody.